And it was a good lead-in because I was going to do the phacolytic glaucoma anyway, and I want to emphasize the difference, the names, phacolytic versus phacoectogenic. New subject. But I wanted to make a transition into this one too. So now, you can ask me, where does this tissue originate from? I have no idea about it. So let's explore this together. Well, first of all, when I look at this tissue, I see this. Fat. Now, the way I like to do this when I'm studying with my students, and you don't have to do this at all, I prefer to call this, just for the purposes of instruction, I like to call this adipose connective tissue because fat can be intracellular, extracellular, but you're right, it's fat. The reason I mention this to you, and I promise I feel so badly for these two residents who asked me about the eyelid, okay, so I apologize again. I'm going to get back a little bit to the eyelid. There is no subcutaneous adipose connective tissue in the eyelid. None. None. So if you are doing, now I'm not talking about you're taking it down here on the cheek something. I'm meaning the eye. There's a very famous question that is asked for the American Board of Ophthalmology. And it is said, doctor, if you take an imaginary scalpel and you will make an incision through the eyelid, 3 millimeters, they're very careful, 2 or 3 millimeters below the lash line, name every histologic plane that you go through. And they want the resident to say, the candidate to say, I have the epidermis, the dermis, the orbicularis, no fat, the orbicularis, the tarsus, the palpebraconjunctiva. Okay? And every American resident knows this. If they don't pass the exam. Okay. Now, if you are ever taking a biopsy of the eyelid, and the pathologist tells you, I see adipose connective tissue, either the disease or you has violated what anatomic plane? The orbital septum. It's fabulous. Okay? Now I have an oculoplastic surgeon. Am I doing this okay so far? So far I'm okay. I'm watching Daniel because I don't want to make a mistake. Okay, good. But this also tells you that if you're ever in an examination situation and you see adipose connective tissue, I'm dealing with an orbital biopsy. So I'm dealing now with an orbital biopsy. Now I come here and I look at this orbital biopsy, and there is some interesting disease processes going on here. But I want to point out to you, we have to identify what is the basic tissue that we're looking at. And here you can see a duct, and you can see an acinus. So we are dealing with which tissue? Lacrimal gland. Now it's diseased lacrimal gland. So let's talk a little bit about lacrimal gland pathology. And now I'm going to ask my pathology colleagues that if I will make a mistake here, you will correct me too, okay? All right, good, good. When you are looking at the duct of the lacrimal gland, I want you to pay attention to the fact that the layers of cells here, you have here, and this is a great place to look. You think a ductule has one layer of cells. Here you have an epithelial cell, and you have a flattened cell just outside the epithelial cell, which we'll call a myoepithelial cell, which becomes very, very important in lacrimal gland pathology. After all, the lacrimal gland is nothing more or less than a minor salivary gland. So the pathology of the lacrimal gland is really salivary gland pathology. Please bear with me for a moment. We do not have here, and you can see inflammation. There's definitely inflammation. You can see the lymphocytes. I'm not hiding it from you. So what are the possibilities that I have inflammation inside the lacrimal gland? Because I was asked by Daniel to talk a little bit about orbital pathology today. Well, you could have a case of what is called sometimes orbital pseudotumor, or in other cases could be called idiopathic orbital inflammation. Same thing. Okay, the same thing. If the inflammation is compartmentalized, it can involve the entire orbit. But sometimes that inflammation is located to specific orbital tissues. I'll give you an example. You can have inflammation of a rectus muscle. You call it orbital myositis. What is the difference between orbital myositis and Graves' disease? Let's think about this for a moment. In orbital myositis, you have the inflammation of the whole muscle. In Graves' disease, you may get some inflammation, but basically the enlargement of the muscle isn't because of inflammation. It's because of the deposition of glycosaminoglycans in the interstitium of the muscle.